My education in what it means to take Sabbath did not come from a professor or from a clergy mentor. It came from the member of a church, Christ United Methodist in Denver. His name was Frank Smith, and he was the manager of Burger King. I was at church one day on a Saturday. I was polishing my sermon up and really just kind of hanging out. Frank walked in and in his blunt and brash way said, "What in the hell are you doing here?" And I kind of sputtered, taken aback by this. I said, "I'm getting ready for tomorrow and just, around in the office, anybody needs anything." And Frank said, "Nobody needs you today. If they do, they'll call. They'll see plenty of you tomorrow. So go home. Wash your car, sit on your deck, take your dog for a walk, but get out of here." If I am honest about today's sermon, it is not for you. It is for me. Because the truth is, I love to work. I'm bad at rest times. I'm bad about taking on too many projects. I can hardly say no to a new creative idea. And we live in a world that worships the hustle, that worships where our value and our worth and our purpose is too often tied to our output, where the notifications on our phone never stop going off. We have become a people who are always on and surprised that we are tired. It is so challenging for me to stop and rest. And typically what happens is either I hit a wall where my creativity is done and my brain forces me to stop, or more often than not, I get sick and my body commands me to stop and rest. Somewhere along the way, our world stopped resting and we chose the distraction of scrolling, thinking that it was rest. Now, if you're of an older generation, you will remember blue laws, Sunday laws, trade laws, closing laws. For those of you who don't know, these are rules of society that said certain activities on Sunday were restricted. How many of you remember when the grocery store was not open on Sunday? Absolutely. There's a time when there were not 24-hour gas stations. There was a time where you did not get an Amazon delivery between 4 and 8 a.m., and this is why Chick-fil-A is closed today. I have some questions for you. How many of you feel guilty when you're doing nothing? How many of you have a hobby that you have turned into a side hustle to make money? How many of us take vacations and still monitor our emails? Folks, we are starving for a rhythm that is not tied to social media or to our bank accounts. In Exodus 20, God gives the people the 10 commandments, and it's important for us to remember these aren't rules for a new club. These are survival instructions for a people who are living in the wilderness and have only ever known how to be property. The first 3 commandments focus upward. Have no other gods, make no idols, don't misuse God's name. They establish who is in charge. That's the first 3. And then comes this 4th commandment, the bridge. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And this commandment is unique because it's the only one that points both backward and forward. It looks back at the first 3, our relationship with God, and forward to the last 6, how we treat our neighbors. Because think about it. You cannot honor your parents. You cannot refrain from killing, stealing, coveting if you haven't first mastered the art of stopping. When we are exhausted, we are reactive. When we are always on, we see our neighbor as a competitor or a hurdle, not as a human. In the Hebrew text, the word Sabbath, Shabbat, literally means to cease. It's not about relaxing. It is about striking against the soul-crushing demand for there always to be more. God is giving the people living in the wilderness a do-over. They've been slaves for 400 years, and their value was the math equation. The number of bricks divided by the hours worked equals your worth. And if you don't produce in this world, you also don't eat. It is important to remember God is deprogramming the people. God's saying you're no longer defined by your output, you're defined by whose you are. Sabbath in this story and in our world is a radical political and spiritual statement, for it declares that even the lowliest servant and the livestock deserve to stop. It's the first labor law in history, but not written in the language of legality, written in the language of holiness. When we keep the Sabbath, we aren't just taking a nap. We are protesting against the idea that we are machines. We are declaring God is God and we are not. When we keep the Sabbath, we stop the competition with our neighbors. We stop the comparison with our neighbors, and we just are. As Israel crossed the Jordan, the Red Sea, and they came out of Egypt, they were living in a time period of absolute chaos and total uncertainty. They faced unprecedented challenges around them, and they were trying to become a people. And you might remember it went really wrong because Moses is up on the mountain getting the 10 commandments from God, and what are the people doing down in the valley? They're melting down all the gold and making cows out of them, right? It did not go well. It is a huge struggle to live into these commandments. But through rest, the people became a new people. We are living in a season of life that feels chaotic and frightening. It's a time when we are collectively trying to figure out who we are and how we actually love our neighbors in the midst of it. But we cannot love our neighbors if we are running on empty. And we can learn from the giants of the civil rights movement. Before they marched, before there were protests, before there were sit-ins, do you know what the people did? They didn't strategize, they gathered. On the eve of a protest, they would meet in the sanctuary to worship, to rest in God's presence, to proclaim God's promise over our lives. And when the march was over and they got out of jail by paying their bail, they didn't rush on to the next protest. They came back to the sanctuary to breathe, to pray, to rest together. Worship wasn't a task on their weekly calendar. It was the oxygen that fueled the movement. For those leaders, they knew a profound truth. You cannot pour out from an empty cup, and you cannot liberate others if you are a slave to your own exhaustion. But here's the hard part about empire. And it might be the empire of Pharaoh's Egypt. It might be the empire of our 24/7 digital economy. It never gives you permission to rest. You have to take it. You have to reclaim it. And sometimes you'd even have to go on strike to get it. In December of 1973, Air Force Academy professor and astronaut William Pogue was part of the Skylab 4 mission. And after weeks of being micromanaged and pushed to a blistering pace by mission control, the astronauts just were exhausted. They were working 16-hour days. They were eating meals while performing experiments. And so Colonel Pogue requested a day off from mission control for his overworked crew. And what did NASA say? No. And so the crew decided they were going to take a break anyway. And so they turned the radio off for 90 minutes. And they sat there and just watched the earth spin around them. The strike on Skylab 4 reminds us that even when mission control of our lives says you got to keep going, our souls have the right to go silent. Like those astronauts, we need to stop from our labors and just look out at the window and remember whose world this is. The Israelites found a new rhythm in the wilderness. And in our always-on world, we need to find a new rhythm. So here is my rhythm for 2026. I am reclaiming the commandment bridge through the pages of a book. My goal is to read 40 books this year, to trade the frantic scrolling of Instagram Reels or Facebook Marketplace for the slow, steady pace of a good story. And so every night, I'm going to turn my phone off, and Finn and I are going to read. And on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, I'm going to turn my phone off and take a nap. And if you call me, you had better be dying. Because when I tell you I am done on Sunday afternoons, it's not because I don't love you. It's not because I don't love this community. It's because I want to love you better on Monday morning. We serve a God who rested, not because God was finished with us, but because God was finished for us. If we get this rhythm right, we won't exclaim, "Thank God it's Friday." We will say, "Thank God it's Monday," because we are fueled by a peace the world cannot give and seeks to take away. So may you go from this place remembering you are not a brick maker for the empire. You are a beloved child of God. Breathe in the holy rest you need.